Hello and welcome to this video series on smart licensing for firepower devices. This series of 8 videos will hopefully guide you through the topic of smart licensing and how it applies to both firepower threat defense and ASA firewalls. The whole series covers the following topics: a general overview of smart licensing for both firepower threat defense and ASA, and finally, smart licensing of firepower in public cloud environments. You can either watch all of the videos in order to get a full overview, or simply watch the videos that are of most interest. In this video, I'll be covering licensing ASA on firepower hardware. Before we begin, we need to make sure that we have the prerequisites for smart licensing. So ensure that you have a smart account, and you can use the URL at the bottom of this video here to take you to the smart licensing pages on cisco.com. Decide what type of access you want to provide into the smart licensing authority, so whether that be direct or via proxy access, or via the satellite server, or using what we call permanent license reservation. Make sure that you have DNS allowed on your chassis to resolve to the license authority if you are going to go for direct, and make sure that the time is correct on the chassis as well. So like in the videos for FTD on firepower hardware, we have a number of options for communicating with the Cisco license authority. We either have the direct access, where devices will communicate directly with the Cisco cloud, or we have the more mediated access, where devices will communicate with a on-prem satellite server before communicating to the Cisco cloud. And then for environments where the security controls are a little bit more strict, we have the air gap capabilities, where we can use the permanent license reservation. So whether we're going for direct, for example, we generate a registration token in the smart software portal. That token is placed into our chassis, whether that's a 4100 or a 9300 from the firepower range. We can then either have direct communications between the chassis and the license authority, or we can go via a satellite server. The other option, as I said before, is to manually register and transfer permanent license reservation details. So that's when it's not possible to communicate either directly or via a satellite server. In this case, we get a reservation request code. We send that up to the smart software portal. We generate an authorization code, and that authorization code is placed back onto the device. Now, when it comes to the chassis themselves, so for example, the firepower 4100 or 9300 chassis, the chassis itself does not require any license to operate. Instead, what we do is we configure the smart licensing infrastructure from here, and it is the portion of the chassis that actually communicates with the license authority. So for example, when you're in the firepower chassis manager, you would go to System, go into Licensing, and then from the smart software portal, you generate your token ID. And if you want more information on how to do that, then the process is detailed in the videos showing you how to do FTD licensing. But from here, we generate the token ID, and we place that into the product instance registration token window on our firepower chassis manager, and we register the device. Once the chassis is registered with the Cisco license authority, each ASA will then need to configure its own entitlements. Obviously, if that's or as it shows there, if this is a ASA cluster, then you only need to configure the entitlements in the master of that cluster. To configure the ASA license entitlements, access the CLI of your chassis and then drop onto the ASA session. And from there, we can enter the license smart command. We can configure our feature tier, which is a required option, and then we can put in our optional features if we need to. So whether we want to go for the carrier instance, which is enables some of the service provider features, for example, things like GTP inspection or diameter inspection, or if we want to enable multi-context on there as well. For virtual ASAs, each virtual ASA will need to configure all of its license entitlements locally. Even if you're using a failover scenario, then the standby unit will have to have the same model license as the active unit. And we do include a default profile in there called license, and that enables to use the smart call home profile to communicate with the license authority. So we can use the call home profile license. Within there then we can set the feature tier standards. Again, whatever feature, well, we need the feature tier standard as the default, and then we can register the ASAV with the licensing authority. Again, the ID token that you use here is generated from the Smart License portal. When it comes to out of compliance tracking, there are 3 ways in which your Smart account can become out of compliance. First one is overutilization, in that you're using more devices than you have licenses for, or more features than you have licenses for. Lack of communication, so the devices haven't communicated with the cloud license portal, or the licenses have expired. All of those 3 can generate an out of compliance warning. Now, with ASA on the Firepower chassis, then you will be, if your account becomes out of compliance, then you are no longer able to make any configuration changes or to add features to features that require special licenses. Otherwise, pretty much everything else on the device will operate as normal and be unaffected. It's probably good to point out this as well. If it's ASAV, then out of compliance will mean that the device is not affected. However, we do recommend then that you go to your Smart Licensing account and make sure that you either purchase licenses to bring you back into compliance, or we can perhaps move licenses around from different virtual accounts to make sure you have enough licenses in your for the devices that are being managed. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful, and please take some time to view the other videos in this series, as well as the other content that we have on offer. Bye for now.